Our last 2-3 classes were devoted to the subject of God's creation and his mysterious power known as Maya. We tried to find answers to some of the most puzzling philosophical questions. If the absolute reality is one and without a second, and if it is of the nature of Satchidananda, pure existence, consciousness, bliss, and if, as Vedanta holds, it is the only reality and the only substance, then how have all these supposedly unsubstantial names and forms, come into being? How is it that we perceive the material universe and its objects to be real? If the ultimate reality is non-dual, one without a second, why do we see this relative world with all its multiplicity? What is the relationship between the one and the many, the absolute and the relative? As we saw, the main explanations came in the form of 3 well-known theories of creation: Arambhavada, Parinamavada, and Vivartavada. The so-called theories of origination, actual transformation, and apparent transformation. Just by way of refreshing our memory, according to the first theory, the theory of origination, the universe didn't exist before it was created. The effect is non-existent before it is produced. According to the second, that is, the theory of actual manifestation, the cause manifests itself as the effect. The effect, before it is produced, exists as the cause. And the last, the theory of apparent transformation. That is how Advaita Vedanta describes the creation. It speaks of the universe as Maya, the illusory superimpositions of names and forms upon Brahman, or reality. How could the absolute have become or have produced the relative? Advaita Vedanta says it is impossible to determine the precise relationship between the two, because there can't be any relationship between reality and appearance. There can't be any relationship between something that exists and something that doesn't really exist. But we do see the universe. And this inexplicable phenomenon, Advaita Vedanta calls Maya. Maya is something that cannot be known. Even if it is experienced, it can't be explained. In order to determine the relationship of the absolute to the visible universe, the finite mind would have to know the infinite, the absolute. But the point is, when such an infinite absolute is known, the finite universe and the finite mind cease to exist. That is why Advaita Vedanta doesn't offer any explanation of creation. Through the power of Maya, names and forms are attributed or superimposed on Brahman, and the relative universe appears to come into existence. When that apparent multiplicity is negated, Brahman stands revealed. So, what is Maya then? Towards the end of our last class, we heard Sri Shankaracharya's comprehensive definition. Maya is the divine power of the Lord. Maya is the divine power of the Lord. She is composed of the three gunas. She has no beginning. She is subtle and imperceptible. That is to say, imperceptible in her potential state. It is from the effects that she produces that her existence is inferred by the wise sages. It is she who gives birth to the entire universe. She is neither real nor unreal, nor both. She is neither different from reality nor non-different, nor both. She is neither composed of parts, nor is she an integral whole, nor both. She is most strange. Her nature is inexpressible. Shankaracharya himself admits that Maya cannot be properly explained or described. Then we heard Swami Vivekananda's beautiful summarization of the entire concept of Maya. He says, Maya is not illusion as it is popularly interpreted. Maya is real, yet it is not real. It is real in that the real behind it gives it its appearance of reality. Let me repeat. Maya is real in that the real is behind it and gives it its appearance of reality. So that which is real in Maya is the reality in and through Maya. Yet, Swamiji says, yet the reality is not seen. And hence, that which is seen is unreal. And it has no real independent existence of itself, but is dependent upon the real for its existence. Maya then is a paradox, real yet not real, an illusion yet not an illusion. One who knows the real sees in Maya not illusion but reality. One who knows not the real sees in Maya illusion and thinks it real. That is what Maya is. Now, according to Shankaracharya's definition, this Maya or Prakriti consists of three gunas. The word Prakriti is actually more appropriate here because we are talking of Maya in its aspect of matter or nature. Anyhow, we'll stick to the word Maya for now. Maya is said to consist of the three gunas known as Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. The word guna is usually translated as quality. But the English word quality doesn't really give the precise meaning of the Sanskrit original. Sattva, Rajas and Tamas are not qualities of Maya. They are not qualities of Maya in the same sense that hardness is the quality of iron, or softness of butter, or heat of fire. Essentially, the gunas are the very substance, the very ingredients of Maya. They are compared to the three strands that make up the rope of Maya. The rope by which Maya binds us to the illusory world. And Maya has no separate, independent existence of the gunas. The three gunas are present in varying degrees, the three gunas are present in all objects of nature, whether gross or subtle, including our body, mind, and ego. In the Bhagavad Gita, we read that the food we eat, the thoughts that we think, the work that we do, in short, everything belonging to this relative universe of Maya consists of these three gunas. Maya is composed of these three. When a kalpa, when a world cycle comes to an end, all names and forms, that is to say, all manifestations subside. They subside and go back to the state of latency, non-manifestation. Then the gunas remain in a state of equilibrium, non-differentiation. They cannot be distinguished from one another. This is called the seed state of the universe. At that time, Maya, in association with consciousness, pure consciousness or Brahman, Maya in association with Brahman, at that time exists as the cause alone, without any of its manifestations. Then suddenly this equilibrium is disturbed, and the gunas again begin to assert their individual characteristics. But what is it that disturbs this equilibrium of the gunas? Two distinct factors. Two factors are involved in starting the process of creation. The one is the will of the Lord, ikshana, just his gaze. The other is the readiness of the soul's karma. I'm using the word souls in the plural. The readiness of the soul's karma to bear fruit. These are the factors that are involved in starting the process of creation. The will of the Lord and the readiness of the soul's karma to bear fruit. These two synchronize, and then creation begins. It is God's will that enlivens, that activates Prakriti. And when this happens, the entire process of creation begins, and all these different objects come into existence. The tangible universe manifests itself step by step. Now, Rajas and Tamas have opposing characteristics, and Sattva strikes the balance between the two. The main characteristic of Rajas is energy. All activity, beginning from the primordial creativity of Mother Prakriti herself, from which everything starts. Even that primordial creativity of Prakriti flows from Rajas. It is this power of Rajas that moves the universe. And it is through the power of Rajas that this phenomenal world, the universe, alternates between evolution and involution, manifestation of names and forms, and their withdrawal into the seed state. Srishti, Laya. But what is the effect of this Rajas on us human beings? How does Rajas express itself in us? Because we are also products of Prakriti. We are also composed of the gunas. The effect is, of course, ceaseless activity. And in and through this ceaseless, restless activity, all our desires and passions, anger, greed, delusion, arrogance, jealousy, all those 6 enemies of spirituality, everything finds expression through rajas. Under the influence of rajas, a person becomes extremely attached to the world. And through that attachment, rajas creates suffering. So, this is the effect of rajas on us, and this is how it finds expression. Then tamas. Tamas is Maya's wheeling power. It hides the true nature of a thing and makes it appear as other than what it really is. We see its influence in human beings in their ignorance, inertia, dullness, inadvertence, unachtsamkeit, in their stupidity. When tamas predominates over rajas and sattva, a person remains inactive or goes to sleep. It deprives humans of their right judgment or definite belief, and it subjects them to doubt and uncertainty. After tamas has revealed the true nature of the self, rajas exerts its projecting power, and then that creates many fantasies, all those fantasies that make up our everyday life. Shankaracharya in his Viveka Chudamani says that even pandits, big pandits, well versed in philosophy, can't escape this hypnotic spell. He says this is the mother of delusion, this wheeling power of tamas. Then comes sattva. Sattva is the giver of happiness. It is characterized by balance, harmony, peace. This is our real friend in our struggle to realize the truth. On the human level, sattva manifests itself as spiritual virtues, purity, calmness, self-control, contentment, simplicity, humility, devotion, longing for liberation, and so on. When sattva predominates, a person feels more detached from the world. Outward activity, as Sri Ramakrishna says, in a sattvic person, outward activity becomes less and less. Meditation becomes deep and intense. And the aspirant tries in various ways to attain lasting peace and blessedness. But the pity is, the 3 gunas always exist together. There cannot be pure sattva without rajas and tamas. Of course, nor can there be pure rajas without sattva and tamas, or pure tamas without sattva and rajas. The difference between one living being and another, the difference between one creature and another creature, lies in the varying proportions of the gunas in their individual constitutions. But through the cultivation of sattva, both rajas and tamas can be kept under control. This much can be done and ought to be done. But let's not forget, the 3 gunas belong to Maya or Prakriti, which includes everything in nature, gross or subtle, inorganic and organic, physical, psychical, everything. They are the very characteristics of relativity, these three gunas. As long as we are attached to any of them, we are phenomenal beings. We are not free souls because we are bound by Maya's rope composed of these three gunas. Even gods and angels are under the influence of these gunas. The gods have more of sattva, we have more of rajas, and animals and plants have more of tamas. Only Brahman, only pure consciousness is untouched by Maya. Only that is beyond the gunas. Sattva binds us to happiness, because I said all three gunas bind. Sattva binds us to what? Sattva binds us to happiness. Rajas binds us to activity, and tamas binds us to delusion. You know that story of Sri Ramakrishna where he compares the three gunas to three robbers. A rich man is passing through a forest when three robbers surround him and rob him of all his wealth. After snatching all his possessions from him, one of the robbers says, "What is the good of keeping the man alive? Kill him." Saying that, he is about to strike their victim with his sword. But the second robber intervenes and says, "But what is the use in killing him? Let us bind him fast and leave him here. Then he won't be able to tell the police anyway." So the robbers tie him up with a rope and go away, leaving him to his fate. But after a while, the third robber returns to the rich man and says, "You are badly hurt, aren't you? Come, I'm going to release you." He sets the man free and leads him out of the forest. When they come near the highway, the robber says, "Follow this road and you will reach home easily." Now the rich man says, "But you must come with me also. You have done so much for me. They'll all be very happy to see you at our home." The robber says, "But no, that is not possible. It's not possible for me to go there. Then the police will catch me." And with that, he leaves the rich man after pointing out his way. Sri Ramakrishna explains, now the first robber who said, "What is the good of keeping the man alive? Finish him off," he is tamas. Tamas destroys. The second robber is rajas, which binds a man to the world and entangles him in a variety of activities. Sri Ramakrishna says, rajas makes a man forget God. Sattva alone shows the way to God. Sattva produces virtues like compassion, righteousness, and devotion. And again, sattva is like the last step of the stairs. Next to it is the roof. Meaning, we have to leave that last step behind if we want to reach the roof. One cannot attain the knowledge of Brahman unless one transcends the three gunas, Sri Ramakrishna says. Now, so much about Maya and the gunas. Vedanta employs the concept of Maya to describe the creation. When it says the universe is Maya, it's only stating a fact. that the non-dual Brahman inexplicably appears as another entity, as the universe of names and forms. But the how and why of the fact that is experienced, that cannot be explained, because Brahman never really became this world. But the fact of appearance, though it is illusory, it is experienced, it remains. Our practical daily life in this world of duality, it would not be possible without Maya. We all live, act, and think in Maya. On the one hand, Maya is inexplicable, mysterious. And on the other hand, it is extremely powerful. It has the power of making the impossible possible, as we saw in Totapuri's life. Under its spell, even an incarnation of God appears to forget his superhuman nature, even an incarnation of God. And he behaves like an ordinary mortal. The contradictions in our thinking and actions, they are also due to Maya. We can't help being contradictory and inconsistent, because we are part of this nature which is also contradictory and inconsistent. We are powerless against it. For example, we know that in this relative world, good is invariably followed by evil. But we work to create only good, hoping that it will ultimately eliminate all evil. Is it possible? We know that the cause determines the effect, but we try to establish peace through war. A man robs his fellow man and then gives away his wealth in charity, hoping for happiness in heaven. Then, no happiness is possible in this world. No happiness is possible in this world without attachment. That is the truth. But attachment also creates bondage and brings suffering to both lover and beloved. Then, wealth creates leisure, and leisure helps build up culture. But in the end, that very cultural refinement weakens society and brings about its downfall. This we see repeatedly in history. Then, the performance of duty, swadharma, elevates us morally. But as we saw long ago, it also obstructs our ultimate freedom. We want to conquer nature, but we end up becoming slaves of matter. Swami Vivekananda says, all this is Maya, because this is a world of contradictions and inconsistencies. As long as we are of this dual world, this Maya or contradiction, this is going to cast its shadow on every thought and action of ours. There is no freedom from Maya in this world. Freedom lies beyond. This is what we learned at the end of our study of Dharma. Jesus said, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Souls souls laden with the burden of relative experience, tired of journeying up and down in this samsara of ignorance, they finally realize that there is no ultimate happiness in Maya. Then they turn their gaze toward God, the Lord of Maya, who is the embodiment of freedom and peace. Krishna says, Indeed, this divine Maya of mine, consisting of the three gunas, is hard to overcome. But those who take refuge in me alone, they shall cross over this Maya. That means the light of God destroys Maya just as the light of the sun destroys the shadows of darkness. Anyhow, since we are talking about our everyday life in this relative world, I'd like to draw your attention to something, to a certain attitude of mind that tends to doubt the value of ethical and moral conduct, because everything is Maya. Now and then we come across people who want to know how consistent the doctrine of Maya is with ethics. How consistent the doctrine of Maya is with ethics. The doctrine of Maya denies the reality of good and evil, surely. So, is morality all that important? You see the tendency to hide behind the doctrine of Maya and ignore all moral values, because then life becomes easy. But let us understand once for all that this is a distortion of the concept of Maya. As long as I am under the spell of Maya, good and evil are real to me. As long as I see the distinction, as long as I feel the distinction between good and evil, I must avoid the evil and follow the good. Let's keep in mind, Shankaracharya does not deny the reality of this world. He does admit the reality of the relative world during the state of ignorance, that is, in our present condition. He even stresses the fact that in that state, both good and evil should be treated as real. That is what he says. So the laws of dharma must be obeyed. In fact, they form the foundation of Vedantic spirituality. Without that, there can be no Vedanta. Without dharma, there is no Vedanta. Only by pursuing the good and avoiding evil can one ultimately go beyond the illusion of duality, beyond the illusory pairs of opposites. If you remember, this was another important lesson that we learned at the end of our study of dharma. So, performance of swadharma, social service, worship, prayer, none of these is in conflict with our mumukshutva, with our longing to rid ourselves of Maya, with our yearning for the attainment of moksha. We have to perform these things first before we can even begin to hope for moksha. According to Shankaracharya, we can't ignore the universe as long as we see it. Nor can we deny our relationships with our fellow humans or with the various things of this world, as long as they appear to be real. And surely they are real to us. They are real to us if we are conscious of the reality of our own individual egos. If I exist, then you exist also. As long as I see multiplicity, I must work, pray, worship, experience the fruits of my karma, experience happiness and unhappiness, everything. In my present state, there is no way I can disregard the difference between good and evil, dharma and adharma. I will be rewarded for being good and following dharma, and I will be punished for the opposite. Shankaracharya even goes to the extent of saying that the validity of the scriptures, the usefulness of spiritual disciplines, and the do's and don'ts of ethics and morality, dharma, they are all based on the recognition that this phenomenal world is real. They are all based on the fact that we think that this world is real. Only from the standpoint of Brahman, they are utterly meaningless. So, if one really believes that the world is unreal, then one's conduct should show it. If my likes and dislikes, my preferences and prejudices are real, then the rules of conduct that are placed in this world are also real. And they apply to me very much. So, that was what I wanted to say about the doctrine of Maya and our everyday life in this practical world. Let us now return to the concept of Maya. How does Maya function in the world? We heard Shankaracharya's words. Though Maya is indescribable and indefinable, yet its existence can be inferred from its effects. Maya's existence can be inferred from its effects. What are those effects? What are the evidences that led sages and philosophers to conclude that something like Maya exists, at least relatively speaking? On what basis did the seers come to the conclusion that Maya existed? You may have guessed the answer already. The main effects are, of course, the facts of creation, preservation, and dissolution of the universe. This we readily know from what all we have learned from Vedanta. These are the main effects of Maya. Maya carries on this work through its two powers, the power of concealment and the power of projection. The power of concealment, it is called Avarana Shakti, and the power of projection is known as Vikshepa Shakti. First, the concealing power, Avarana Shakti, obscures the knowledge. Obscures the knowledge of whom? Knowledge of what? Knowledge of the observer. Avarana Shakti conceals the knowledge of the observer, but of what? Of the observer's own true nature. I repeat, Avarana Shakti obscures the knowledge of the observer's own true nature. Like in the case of a sleeping person who doesn't know anything. In the same way, Maya veils the true nature of Brahman, who is the witness, the unaffected spectator. Maya in itself may be insignificant and unsubstantial, yet through some mysterious power, it hides Satchidananda. It hides Brahman like a patch of cloud covering the sun, to use the classic example. A small patch of cloud, which is nothing but water vapor, which may be no bigger than my hand, but it can cover the bright sun, which is 1,000,000 times larger than the earth itself. When Avarana Shakti has done its job, then the projecting power creates the universe with all its objects. First, the person's consciousness is obscured by sleep, and then the person begins to dream. This is how it happens. But actually, the two powers of Maya function practically simultaneously. This is how the Absolute or Nirguna Brahman in association with Maya, Nirguna Brahman in association with Maya comes to be seen. It does not become the conditioned Brahman, it comes to be seen or regarded as the conditioned or Saguna Brahman, Ishvara, the personal God who is the creator and projector of the universe. This entire universe, the entire creation, is said to be Ishvara's dream. So, it is through Maya that Brahman, which is the eternal subject, becomes an object of knowledge, so to say. Maya obscures the reality of Brahman. Brahman, which is in reality infinite and ever free, regards itself as a finite entity bound to the world. But it is this finite, bound self, Jivatma, that again seeks moksha and practices spiritual disciplines like self-control, prayer, worship, concentration and meditation. It is this finite bound self that practices all these and at last realizes Brahman, its own true infinite self. This means that as the veil of Maya is removed, the eternal light of Brahman reveals itself. It has nothing to do with sequence. When this happens, that happens, the other thing happens automatically. When darkness is removed, light reveals itself. But what is important to note is, throughout this time, in spite of the patch of cloud covering it, the sun had never lost any of its brilliance. Brahman, in spite of its concealment by Maya, Brahman had always and fully retained its nature of pure consciousness. It was unaffected all the time. So, this is how Maya functions through its two powers of concealment and projection. When Brahman's true nature is hidden, a condition arises. A condition arises where the infinite contracts, so to say, and becomes an individual. In philosophy, this is known as individuation. individuation. Something general becoming something particular, something separate, distinct, and other than something else. That is why we feel we are separate beings, separate from each other. And when this happens, then we have this relative existence qualified by diversity. When the real nature of the rope is concealed by darkness, there arises the condition, the possibility of the ropes being mistaken for a snake. In the same way, when the true nature of Brahman becomes concealed by Maya, conditions are created for its appearance as a jiva, or a finite, individual creature that is endowed with the idea of being the doer of action and the experiencer of pleasure and pain, love and hatred and all the rest. It is like when my consciousness is obscured by the concealing power of sleep, ajnana. When my mind is overpowered by sleep, the condition is created in which I see fantastic dreams and take them to be real. This is what. As I said, the Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti, the concealing and projecting powers, function almost simultaneously. Ignorance, which conceals the real nature of the rope, also has an inherent power to create the illusion of a snake. It is simultaneous. It is not sequential. It is this projecting power that creates the illusion of the entire universe with all its objects and creatures. As long as reality is covered, illusion is projected. This is how Brahman, associated with Maya, becomes the creator or projector of the universe, just as I am the creator of my dreams. But the projection, like the dream, is only an appearance. It is not real. Brahman, being absolute, cannot participate in an act of creation, or any action for that matter. Let's understand it properly, because this is important. What happens is, when we see the universe of diversity and seek its cause, we find the cause of this diverse universe in Brahman associated with Maya. I hope you got it. When we see the universe of diversity and seek the cause, we find it in Brahman associated with Maya, that is to say, Ishvara or Saguna Brahman. That is what is meant. So, according to Advaita Vedanta, the universe is falsely superimposed upon Brahman through Maya. But that superimposition does not affect the real nature of Brahman even in the least. So, that is what I had planned to say today about Maya and its gunas and powers. Thank you.